Thank you, Omar. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. And hello, Gary.
Hi.
Thank you for being
Oh,
here.
so great to be back.
What a thrill and a privilege to be in conversation with you tonight about your most recent book. Got it here, Vera or Faith, which I believe will be for sale after the conversation tonight, and Gary will be available to sign copies.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
so please be sure to pick one up if you haven't already. Gary, I'm so excited to talk to you about this book. But before we dive in, I just want to acknowledge that this conversation is happening in the Mark Twain House and Museum. Mark Twain, of course, being a legendary writer and satirist. I think we could use the same words to describe you. How or do you see yourself in kind of Twain's line of influence?
Well, I've always been a huge reader of Twain. In fact, I would say that some of the first real novels that I read were Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn, except I read them in the Soviet Union when I was a kid. Uh, Huckleberry Finn. Uh, and I think Tom Sawyer came with a introduction by one of Stalin's henchmen condemning, this is what happens when capitalism runs amok. You get whitewashing offenses for no communal profit, etc. But I loved it. I had a big crush on Becky Thatcher. I thought she was amazing. But that kind of humor always appealed to me. Obviously, I was reading it in translation, but I thought it was lovely. It was also obviously Huckleberry Finn explored some very deep and horrific American themes, but at least with Sawyer, I remember it had a very light touch. And that's something I like. I enjoy writing books that maybe do touch upon some tragic themes, but I always think of humor as a very important part of it. It's sort of the part of the rocket that gets the payload over. The payload is tragedy, but the rocket is comedy. And so for me, it's very important to keep the comedy in the mix. Which I write literary fiction, which some people think has to be incredibly serious. But for me, some of the best writers on both sides of the Atlantic and just about anywhere else in the world are writers that dabble in comedy. Comedy is hard because, like I said, good comedy has to encompass. It can't just be pratfalls. I mean, it could be, but for me, a good book has to have both elements that are entertaining and things that make you stop and think and feel too.
Oh, yes, absolutely. In the green room where Gary and I were sitting before coming out here, all the walls are covered in kind of quotes and signatures from the many great writers who have graced this stage. And one of the quotes, and I couldn't make out the name of the writer or who signed it, but the quote is something like, "If only Mark Twain were here today to help us make sense of the world." And I thought, well, we don't have Mark Twain, but we have Gary Shteyngart.
Oh, thank you. That's really very kind of you. Yeah, I mean, it's I've been so fascinated by Mark Twain both as a writer and as a personage because he was also kind of, and those of you who have obviously been to this museum before and who've been to the house and who have perhaps read some of the many biographies, including the recent one, he was larger than life. What would he be doing today? I don't know. He'd probably be investing in crypto
Most
and
definitely.
all kinds of weird crap that would bankrupt him. He'd be sort of making his own tragedy. So that's not me at all. But I am, as Twain would be if he were alive, quite active on social media, at Shteyngart on Twitter and Facebook. I hate every second of being there, but a part of me, the Twainian part of me, says you have to do it. And he was a great wit at a time where I think Oscar Wilde was another great wit across the ocean, but I think he was a performer. He was a performance artist in some ways, and that's not a role that I eschew entirely. I'm not the lonely writer up in his garret writing away. One of Dostoevsky's miscreant characters. That's not me at all. I'm out and about, and I do about 3 or 4 pieces of long form journalism every year where I, go out in the world and do crazy things, hang out with the world's largest rodent in Argentina, or the best rodent ever, or get a suit made by the best tailor in the world and stuff like that.
Well, let's talk about your latest book. We can talk about the rodent and all the other writing as well.
Mm.
Um, but Vera or Faith, your latest novel, has a fascinating origin story. Would you,
Yeah.
yeah, tell us how this book came about.
So for the last 3 novels I've written, my first 4 books very much concerned my own, write what you know, as your high school teacher would have told you, experience. So they were very, a Russian immigrant comes to America, everything's messed up, blah, blah, blah. So I got that out of the system and I needed something new. I started writing about other things. But what I realized is that's a lot harder than sort of exhausting your own biography. So for the last 3 novels, I would write about 200 pages of a book and show it to my wonderful editor at Random House, and he would say, in a very genteel, waspy, diplomatic way, he would say, "Gary, what do you think this book is about?" And that would be my signal that it sucks and I need to start all over again. Everything's terrible. So I was on vacation with my family in Korea, and we were flying 14 hours or whatever to back to New York. And I had a meeting with David about the 200 pages I'd submitted. David is my editor, about the 200 pages I'd submitted. But as I was having my many martinis aboard the plane, I check out my article about martinis in the New Yorker. But as I was having my many martinis, I was thinking, what if I'm going to have another one of these encounters where over blue ribbon sushi in Columbus Circle, he tells me, "What do you think this is all about?" So I began, and oddly enough, what was playing on on the plane's entertainment system was Kramer versus Kramer. Remember that? Meryl Streep versus Dustin Hoffman. I used to watch that movie a lot when I was a kid, but I didn't
Great
speak
movie.
any English, so I was just happy to see parents fighting without throttling each other, which is the Russian way. So I was like, this is what a nice family, even in the middle of divorce, they keep their hands to themselves. This is really cool. But I was watching and mesmerized, and there's a kid whose name is either Billy or Bobby. I don't know, one of those 70s names that nobody uses anymore. But I mean, I should talk Gary, but I was like, well, what's Bobby's or Billy's point of view on all this, right? It's all Dustin Hoffman and Meryl Streep. Like, what about this little kid? And then that made me think of the Henry James novel, What Maisie Knew, which was actually made into a pretty good film, set in a Tribeca loft, very hipster, a couple of years ago. Then I was thinking, well, what if all this was happening in a slightly more dystopian future? This was still a couple of years ago where things were a little different. Then I began, what was the next step? Oh yeah, I began to think also of my own childhood because I would always referee my parents' fights. My parents fought nonstop. And I would, much like Vera does in the book, Vera makes these lists, the 10 reasons you need to stay together with daddy, or the 10 reasons you need to stay together with mom. She only comes up with 6 for mom, um, but that's exactly what I would do. I would constantly be the diplomat and sit down with my mom or dad and be like, look, he has his faults, but at the same time, blah, blah, blah. So I became a real diplomat. In a weird way, it helped me get some sense of empathy for, relating the way people relate to one another or don't relate to one another. And also, Vera keeps a lot of lists. And I was remembering back to how when we were in America, my parents, like all Soviet immigrants, took these computer classes. I think a lot of immigrants did this. There were all those languages, COBOL and Fortran, the IBM punch card machine. So on one side of the punch card, they would write the English, and on the other, the Russian. So I remember words like diabetes and stroke and heart attack, all the things that kill Russians before they're 30, and we would sort of turn it over and look up those things. So that was a lot of, Vera also is trying to master lists, but her lists it's because her parents fight in a very advanced English and she's trying to figure out what some of these words mean. Also, she lives in a very repressive social and political system, so she's also trying to figure, so she's, as a, anxious, precocious kid, she's always attuned to what everyone is saying. And even though Vera herself is a bit of an innocent, as she should be at age 10, the humor of her trying to keep a diary of words she doesn't know allows me to sneak in the absurdities of the world around her, the absurdities of her parents, and the absurdities of the country around her. So I landed in New York, and I had that lunch with my editor. He said, and the book I was writing, 200 pages, was a multi-generational. Oh God, I'm so bored even talking about it. Multi-generational saga, but it had an espionage plot, and that actually, spoiler alert, made it into a bit of the book as well, into Vera. So the moment he said, what do you think this book is about? I said, I have plan B. I watched Kramer versus Kramer. And I told him, and he said, yeah, that sounds good. Why don't you do that? Now, I only had at this point, the book was due in like the end of the year, and there was 55 days left to the year. And being the crazed immigrant that I am, I thought, I'm going to write this. I even Googled, how short can a novel be to be considered a novel? According to E.M. Forrester, 50,000 words makes you a novelist. And this is 50,040. So that's why you got to pay the big bucks, 25 bucks for that. 50,000, $2 a word or something. No, it's what he said. I can't do math. In any case, so I went nuts and just started writing so much. Usually a writer works about 2-3 hours a day and calls it, and then there's like 4 hours for crying, about the state of novels in the world. Then you see your shrink, and at my age, various other doctors. But no, I just started writing and walking around New York thinking about what the next page would be. And I started to experience this incredible sense of vertigo. I started like losing my balance. And this went on for weeks. And I went to see the New York's most prominent vertigo specialist. Of course, we have one. He put me in this giant helmet with strobe lights, and then he threw me on the couch with the helmet on. I am not even joking. This was like, remember 2001 at the end? It was sort of like that. It was just like that, actually. I rewatched 2001 after that experience. But he, and after all the tests were done, he said, this is psychological. Or maybe he said psychiatric. That's probably more accurate. And then, but as soon as my editor read the draft of it and said, I like it, the problem went away. So incredibly tied into it. But yeah, this was the fastest I've ever written or should ever write. Yeah.
50 plus days. That's incredible.
It's crazy. Never again. Yeah.
So you told us a little bit more about the titular character, Vera. She's a 10-year-old girl, appropriately naive. I would say kind of moves to the world with this wide-eyed earnestness. And I have to say, like, Gary, it feels like a real departure from a lot of her previous characters. I mean, not just because she's a child, but she lacks what, I don't know if you would agree, a cynicism.
Well, she's 10. It's very hard for her to be cynical. I was worried. My worry was writing about a precocious child. But what are you going to do? Write about a stupid child? Like, that's not fun for anyone, right? I don't know. But yeah, I never thought I would have a kid, but I do have a kid. He's 11 now. He's a boy. But he, and like Vera, he goes to school for these sort of like gifted and talented kids in New York. And I went to high school like that, Stuyvesant High School, and this is like the pre-Sty. They take a test when they're 4 to get into the school. You can't make it up. So I thought that was all fascinating. Also, tons of immigrants in those schools, myself included. But my son's not an immigrant; he was born here. But his experiences in these schools really brought me back to my days at Stuyvesant, where it was dog eat dog. Kids would sabotage each other's Westinghouse science experiments. It was like brutal. So there's a lot of pressure, and I thought the pressure would be an interesting thing to write about. Because all these kids are already, they're like 10, but they're already thinking of how am I going to get into MIT or Yale or whatever. And so Vera keeps saying, I have to be a woman in STEM. I have to be a woman in STEM. And And at one point, she gets a B plus, and it's like the biggest tragedy to have ever befallen a child in literature. And her mom has to go in and negotiate it up to an A minus, which was so par for the course in the school that my kid attended. It was really incredible. There's a line in there which I think is, again, it's not satire, but it's like one of the non purely wedded to Vera's point of view, and it's the line is something like, the mothers who all had high-powered careers complained to the principal about how much homework they had to do, even though their kids were helping out a little. And that's exactly what it feels like. Like these schools are so insane that the whole family is pretty much deputized to help, to work. It's a family affair. And I'm like, what is this for? What are kids learning? I don't know. It's like this. They have to get in the right school because AI is going to take away all the other jobs, right? I don't know. It's sad. I mean, Stuyvesant was great for me because it got me out of Queens, and that changed my life quite a bit. But academically, I don't remember anything. It was all balance and equation. I'm like, you balance it. I want to write a book. But Vera, yeah, watching the way these children interact was fascinating. And I wanted to write about a girl because it was obvious from interacting with these kids that the girls had a wider emotional purview, I think, at this age, and probably most ages, than boys or men. And then the other, it's interesting that as I've been going around the country talking about this book, that a lot of especially women, but not just women, have recognized kind of themselves in Vera, those who have read it, because I think to be a reader in some ways almost presupposes an anxious childhood, right? Because
So true.
I think that anxiety gives way to a kind of worry and sensitivity about the world. Your skin is more permeable to understanding, what the world is like, socially, emotionally, all these ways, even though Vera has tons of social emotional issues. But I thought that would be an more interesting point of view. She does have a brother who's kind of a doofus, uh, but yeah, I find girls to be more interesting for now anyway. We'll see what happens.
She's a fascinating character, and the majority of the book focuses on her and then the dynamics of her complex family. Um, but that family story is set against this like, socio-political backdrop that is pretty dystopian.
It's dystopian, but it's for me anyway. It's dystopia light. I mean, this is. I went full dystopian, super sad, and it took about. That came out in 2010. Took 8 years for that to come true. Um, well, six. Okay, 6 years. Sorry. This came true. The book was released on July 8th, and one of the main premises of the book is that in this slightly futuristic America, people who can trace their heritage back to the Revolutionary War are called exceptional Americans, and those who didn't come in chains are exceptional Americans and get 5/3 of a vote. So it's the 5/3 compromise. The day after it came out, July 9th, J.D. Vance, our vice president, gave a speech in which he said that people who can trace their origins back to the Revolutionary War are exceptional Americans, and nobody should make fun of them or anything that they stand for. He did not yet stipulate the 5/3 vote, but I was shocked. A day, I was like, because I know Usha Vance is a huge reader, and I was like, did she speed read this? I mean, it's only 200 pages. Did she speed read this? And tell JD, hey, buddy, here's an idea. 5/3 of a vote. It won't, me and the kids won't get it, but yeah, good times.
Yeah. Oh goodness. Well, no spoilers, of course, but I will say that there is a very hopeful kind of tone in this book, at least from my perspective in reading it. And first off, I don't know if you would agree. I do feel like I felt like it was fairly hopeful. But if you do agree, I mean, did you know that you wanted to write a hopeful story despite these dystopian elements?
No, I always joke that I'm a SAP, a Soviet Ashkenazi pessimist, and for me, it's not that the glass is half full or empty. It's like there's no glass, empty table, no Poland Springs. Poland's been invaded, no springs. Uh, but Yeah, I don't know. Hopeful, yeah, for my usual kind of books. Maybe it's and going back to your question about where the satire is. I mean, I think this is still a pretty funny book. Hopefully,
For sure.
for sure. Okay, good. I would not come to Mark Twain house if I had written, you know. I think when I was writing earlier books like Absurdistan, I was a young kind of burn it all down kind of guy. You know, I hated the world. I had a big meaty fist I wanted to shake at it. Everything was comedy, but I think having a kid, you know, you become a little different, and to burn down the world now means the world that he lives in. It doesn't feel as appetizing. So yeah, it's been tempered somewhat. Now, horrible things happen, especially without any spoilers toward the end of the book. Terrible things happen, and a lot of what has been politically and socially being built up sort of reveals itself in its full horror. But Vera has a few things she wants to accomplish, and I'm going to just spoil this, she accomplishes the thing that she really wants, which is to make her first friend. And that to me was, and I'm still waiting for my first friend, but one day, you know, I wrote this book as almost a manual for myself to figure this out. What's the trick? And to me, that was, I remember, you know, as I was writing it, I felt, you know, the tender core inside me, which I normally don't feel. Usually I'm writing and laughing into my, you know, earbuds. But no, this time I was thinking, oh, yeah, I remember what this felt like making a first friend and just how remarkable and scary it is. And in a way, it's almost more remarkable than having your first romantic partner, you know. So, you know.
Yeah, I mean, this is how real I felt Vera was on the page. I actually teared up when that friendship kind of emerged. It was
Oh,
really,
thank you.
really beautiful. Um, can we talk about Stella and Caspi?
Yeah, yeah. So I also, again, this was written a year and a half ago, but I had a feeling AI would become more of a problem than it was at that point. Um, Again, I'm love. I mean, I hate technology, but I love seeing what it does to us, seeing it strip away our humanity piece by piece, like beef jerky. So um, there's two AIs in this book. One is actually going back to my slightly optimistic tone. It's a AI that Vera loves called Caspi, named after Gary Kasparov. It's a chess set. You move the chess pieces around. And Caspi is a kind of proto friend. Before she can make her first human friend, she plays with Caspi. He's also a little bit of a father figure. He was also made and trained in Korea. And one of the themes of this book, because her mom is her stepmom in the book, and her birth mom was Korean American, but and part of the book is she's trying to find her, and Caspi helps her out with that. So he, you know, that's my positive AI. Then there's a kind of very annoying car named Stella, and Stella's a self-driving car, but she's super ingratiating and obsequious, and she just wants everyone, she wants to please whoever's in the car, and so she just compliments everyone, tries to talk in their, tries to use their mannerisms. And what's interesting is after I wrote this book, I was listening to a podcast about AI, and they were talking about how this is actually a huge problem, that all these AIs have been designed by these giant corporations to keep, you know, they want you coming back and using them. So if you say, if people have said to some of these AIs, hey, I don't know what it is, Chat GPT, I don't know, whatever AI, hey AI, you know, I have an IQ of 80. Am I one of the smartest people that's ever lived? And the AI is like, based on my calculations, you're in the 0.3% of smartest people ever. And I knew that about you just from the questions you ask. You're so smart, and your bald spot is like this beautiful, shining beacon of hope. You know, thank you for just being my friends. So, yeah, once again, you know, I was talking about how J.D. Vance made that speech a day after it was published, but yeah, that has also come true. So, the ultimate feeling I have as somebody who writes sort of on the edge of, you know, the future and the present is that there is no more present, that we're all living in a kind of future that just heaps more and more upon us, as we run like hamsters on a treadmill, you know, trying to catch up with it, trying to make sense of it, you know. So I don't know, I wrote a book, last book that was set during the pandemic, and that at least had this kind of wonderful beginning and an end, right? It was a historical period. We all went through it. So you could say, okay, that existed and then it stopped. And this is this little moment in time, right? The way people will write about, I don't know, the year Kennedy was assassinated or something was something or very, very particular in time, historical. But the rest of our lives is just endless slop washing over us politically, technologically. It just never ends, and no year is the same as the past year. You look at someone with an, well, Mark Twain. Well, let's go back a little, like Tolstoy, right? He wrote over a gigantic span of years. Yeah, toward the end of his life, a lot of those technologies started to change. But for decades, you used a car and a horse, and it wasn't an electronic. You used a cart and a horse, and it wasn't an electronic cart or a flying drone cart. All the things were moving at a very much slower rate than it is today, and the technologies that were improved weren't sort of integrated into our very pockets and soon probably bodies. So all that is, and yet, what does the writer do? I mean, I guess you can write historical fiction, right? But that's not me. I don't know what happened in the past. I enjoy some historical novels, but I'm, and this is maybe because I do, 3 or 4 big journalistic pieces a year. I'm, you know, addicted to the present slash future. But this time I wanted it to be filtered not through the usual kind of me type character, but through a young girl for whom all this stuff is not, people of my or our generations may be like, oh, this technology is terrible. She doesn't know any different. My kid doesn't know what life. I showed him a payphone. He was completely dumbfounded by it. I'm like, well, you put a quarter in there, and then you couldn't. He was like, where's the FaceTime screen? I'm like, well, you're not going to believe this.
So this book isn't filtered through your eyes, Gary. But Vera does have a father who is a Russian immigrant who really likes martinis. I read your incredible martini tour article in the New Yorker. Um, I mean, is that kind of an Easter egg for your fans, or?
I guess a little bit. I mean, yeah, he also, I think, does like capybaras. I think there's one line in there where he says they're his favorite giant rodent. But he collects fountain pens, whereas my sad hobby is watch collecting. Yeah. But he does love martinis, which I love as well. And that article was the hardest article I've ever written. There was a guy, also actually a watch collector, who I had 10 martinis with during one day. He kept saying, "We got to protein up," and we had to constantly eat those devils on horseback, and deviled eggs. And finally, look, I'm Russian, but everything has limits. And I was like, I need to hydrate. And we were at a steakhouse. He was like, of course, of course. And he was like, waiter, gin and tonic for him. Somehow I made it home in one piece. But yeah, I thought I'd have a little fun with a me type character. I always, when I write about, whenever there's a me type person, it's me, but much, much worse. So here, am I the perfect parent? No, but I'm not this bad. This guy,
For
this guy
sure,
just
no.
lies around in his underwear most of the day, just looking at fountain pens on his phone and being a manfluencer. You know. And then when his wife gets angry, she's like, "Well, this keeps the lights on around the house." Social media does that here, which it doesn't. So I had some fun with him, yeah. But poor Vera, like she needs a real parent, and the parents are always fighting, and that that really reminds me of my own childhood. But not my kid. My wife and I are very mild, and I think we never try to. Maybe we should try to fight a little bit in front of him, but we're such 21st century parents where it's like, no, never shall he see us angry. Especially my wife's of immigrant background. I am an immigrant, so we're trying to be different, more American.
Oh, well, so much of that is in here. I just can't say enough how much I enjoyed this book, and I hope you all do pick up a copy after our conversation today. Here in a moment, I'm going to kind of hand things over to you all because I want to hear questions for you. I'm sure Gary is very interested to hear questions from you all. But before I do that, Gary, I want to play a quick game with
Oh,
you.
okay. Oh boy.
And this game is called Does Gary Know
Oh
Gary?
no.
So
I
here's
you know. Go ahead.
so
Sorry.
here's how it's going to work. I have a series of cards, and on each card is a line from something that you have written. Might be from a book, might be from some reportage, and I want to see if you can guess where that line is from.
I've failed this already in several cities, so hopefully Hartford will give me my luck.
And if
Mark
you
Twain, channeling Mark Twain.
if you see that Gary is struggling to know
Oh
Gary, and
yeah.
if any of you know the answer,
Yeah.
please raise your
That's
hand.
right.
All right. So here is the first one. Would you read it out
Oh
for
boy.
us?
All right. Oh, I know this one. To reach 91 is an incredible feat for a Russian man, and we are all genuinely surprised that you are still here with us. That I know because I just wrote it. That's from Vera, right? Right. Okay. Okay.
That is
Good.
correct. That
Okay.
is from
Okay.
Vera.
Okay. If
Okay.
I'd not known that, we'd be in deep, deep trouble. I'd be getting a neurological exam. Okay.
All right. I think these are going to get progressively more difficult.
Okay. Good. Okay.
Here's your next one.
My expression upon disrobing resembled that of a dog looking up at his mistress after a bowel movement of hazmat proportions.
Where was
What
it
the
from?
hell is that? Did I write this? Because sometimes I outsource to an AI. Because that is bananas. Hazmat.
Definitely not written by Stella or
Not
Caspi.
Stella or Caspi.
Yes?
So it's hold on. First person, right? First person. So Russian Deb, absurdist stands. Super sad.
Nope. Nope.
Oh crap.
Nope. Nope. That was actually fairly recent. It was from your suit piece in the Atlantic.
Oh, my suit piece. Oh God. Okay. I completely forgot about that. What am I even talking about here? How does that? What does this have to do with the suit? Who wrote this crap?
Oh,
Sorry.
no, that's okay. And
Wow.
there's some.
Okay.
Okay.
That's a tough one.
Here's your third one.
Okay. We lived in a society that rewarded its worst people. We lived in a society where the villains were favored to win. Ooh, this sounds like it was definitely during the Trump age. So, not absurdistan, I don't think. You think? Uh-oh. Country Friends? Maybe. Maybe Lake Success. Lake Success?
Ding, ding, ding.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, congratulations. But those were great guesses. I was going down that road too. Yeah.
Yep.
Lake Success. Oh, who? Maybe his wife says this to him. I don't remember. Maybe.
Okay. Just two more.
Two more. Okay. So
more.
far, what did I get? 2 out of 3? Not
Two
bad.
out of three. Not bad.
My hair is as long as and unruly as the Italian state, and the gap between my crooked teeth is its own opera, but the rings under my eyes that have made me such an underage raccoon out of me are gone. That sounds very memoirish. Is this Little Failure?
Yes. Well
Killing
done.
it. Killing it.
Someone's
Hartford.
Like, Gary knows Gary.
That's
All
it.
right. Last one.
This did not trouble him. Being hated was something he could work with. I have no idea. Super sad.
No, our country friends.
Oh, it's the actor. Oh, yeah. I thought it was super. Well, 3 out of 5.
3 out of 5.
It's a
3 out of 5. It's almost like
60%.
you like this Gary guy.
I
You're
know a little
familiar-
bit about
you know
Gary.
his work.
God, it really is scary. I mean, I've been writing I started writing in college, '95. It's been 30 years, and
Wow.
it's weird. I feel like I could retire. It's a lot
We
of
don't want you
words.
to.
I won't. Mortgage, and I just got a new dog, and he is so hungry. He's a wiener dog, so there's a lot of tube to feed.
Well, you all have heard a lot from us and all about Gary's dog. What sort of questions do you have? And do we have someone with a microphone, or should I? What do you recommend, Omar? Yeah, project. Yeah, that sounds great. Great. Yeah. So, any questions for Gary? Right here up front.
Yes. Uh, Yeah, question is, do I teach at Columbia? Ooh, Columbia, spicy university, right? So many wonderful things happening there. It's muy caliente. Yes, I do teach at Columbia. I still enjoy the heck out of it. I'm somehow tenured, but only have one semester a year, and then they let me 9 months off for a mental health break. But it is absolutely fascinating, and will definitely one day I will. I haven't written a campus novel yet, but I am aching to write one. Used to be campus novels were considered kind of passe. It was kind of a '60s slash '70s thing. My favorite novel ever, by the way, is Nabokov's Pnin, which is set in what must be Cornell University. But yeah, things are spicing up on all these fronts that make my ears perk up. Um, this semester, we had a student at the very end of the class who wrote using AI,
Oh no.
and everybody went nuts. I had to give an hour-long speech about don't use AI.
This
But
is a writing student.
a writing student, yeah, he wrote a third in using himself, and then two-thirds with AI of the submission. Fascinating, really fascinating. I do some TV work and film work, and my Hollywood guy tells me that AI is huge in writing rooms now, especially for the dumber movies and TV. And that shouldn't be that surprising, you know. I mean, you can ask it a plot twist, and you have two characters plugged in. What do they say to each other? And then they just come up with something, you know. You say, well, she's, social worker graduate, half Jewish, lives on the Upper West Side. He's from Hartford, uh, works in insurance, blah, blah, blah. And then you got your script 10 seconds later. You got all the dialogue you'll ever need. So that is pretty scary.
Talk about dystopian.
That's dystopian. But yeah, but now I'm really anxious to get back into TV writing now that someone else is going to do it for me. Very excited.
Other questions? Yes, over here.
Mhm. Uh-huh. Thank you. That's a great question. When did I come here and were my parents forced out? No. We came in 79, and this is a very interesting, slight historical detail that many don't know about, but I will tell you. Jimmy Carter and Leonid Brezhnev reached a crazy deal. Russia the Soviet Union had a very poor harvest, the string of them. No wheat, no wheat. Also, horrible technology. Television sets kept exploding all the time. Ours did. Um, and so Russia desperately needed wheat and higher technology. And America has always desperately needed more Jews. So a deal was made, I am not kidding you, that tons of grain and TVs with remote controls were exchanged for 50,000 Jews, of which I was one. We are called grain Jews. So I was essentially traded for a baguette. I don't know who got the better side of that deal, since baguettes are very tasty. I am not. Um, nuts, really nutty stuff. And that was, yeah. And then after that deal was over, under Reagan, very few people left. And then when the Soviet Union fell apart, more started coming. But we were very, very, very lucky to leave. And I was 7 when I came to America. Was sentenced to 8 years of yeshiva for a crime I did not commit. But once I recovered from that, well, then Stuyvesant, that wasn't that was really hard too. Finally, Oberlin, where I could just get high and write novels. That was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Right over here, and then we'll come over here.
Oh, that's an interesting point. Yeah. Did I? Oh, yeah, because she shares a lot of things with Vera. She's a little bit more. Uh-huh. That is so interesting. I didn't think of it as I was writing this, but I think you're right. Here's another interesting thing. A lot of readers have been contacting me through the social media channels asking if Vera is neurodivergent, which was also partly an issue with the child in the other book. I did not write her to, with that in mind, although I knew some of her behaviors might be read that way, but, and they're both adopted. Shoot. I'm going to really ball out the AI that wrote both of these books for not using any originality whatsoever. I'm like, now you're copying yourself? Great. Okay. Well, thank you for destroying my whole. No, I'm kidding. No, obviously and there's a difference between because Vera is she's technically, I mean, she's her father is her father, and she has a stepmom who adopted her. So it's a little different. The other child in our country friends was from China and was just adopted from China. Her parents are not Chinese Americans. But yeah, it's an interesting question. And I think maybe I'm trying to create some kind of generational friction that I felt with my own parents. I mean, even they were biologically my parents. I felt after coming to this country that we were from two different planets, that they were still living in the planet they had left, and I was trying to acclimate to this planet. Maybe some of that, some feeling of things not being 100% continuity, which I guess, look, generational change is so huge, and raising a child who knows how to use technology, whereas I don't, is also a little bit of that kind of motif. My second favorite book after Nabokov's Pnin, which I can recommend to you, is Turgenev's Fathers and Sons, which is about the size of Vera, 200 odd pages. I hope he got his E.M. Forrester 50,000 words in because it's very short, but it is a heartbreaking book about generations of parents and children.
Yeah, there was a question here.
No, no. I mean, look, I learned it real good. I learned English real good. Oberlin made you. Yeah, there was a lot of Oberlin English studies type stuff. No, I had an accent until I was 14. I had to listen to Neil Diamond records to overcome that. Say, coming to America. But no, I don't. But I'll say this: that having Russian as a second language is good because it creates a kind of second soundtrack, and then you can write about. I don't know. I find that bilingual authors are often really good at recreating sentences in a slightly different way, the same way that fusion cuisine, for example, uses different ingredients. Writers like Juno Diaz or Edwidge Danticat, for example, the way they use rhythms from Dominican Republic or Haiti, or you name an author who writes in English but has a different background, and that's not going to be ye old. There's going to be a little difference to how they write. So yeah, that's a good point.
That's fascinating. Question, yes, right over here.
Oh, the title, yeah. Yeah. So Vera means faith in Russian and in other Slavic languages. Yeah, yeah. And I wanted Vera in this super cynical world in which she lives in. Politicians are trying to pass this 5/3 vote. The rest of society is going to hell in a handbasket. Her parents' marriage is going to hell in a handbasket. Everyone is out for themselves. I wanted Vera, partly because of her age, but partly because she somehow avoided the worst of the things around her, to have some faith in the world and for the reader to feel a little bit of faith in the future, as long as there's enough Veras to go around and keep it going. So that faith is not meant in a religious sense at all. It's meant in faith in humanity, perhaps, faith that there still is a place for people, for children, that children will still grow up tender-hearted despite all the pressures that we push on them to be, women in STEM and to get into MIT or whatnot, that there's still some hope. So the title itself is a little bit of hope from my part. Also, I love, as I mentioned, Vladimir Nabokov. His wife was Vera. Vera did everything for Nabokov. Some say she wrote some of his stuff because she was a budding writer herself, but she gave it all up to be his assistant, chauffeur, all the servants he lost during the 1917 revolution. Vera tried to accomplish. So maybe it's a little bit of an homage to Vera Nabokov.
Yeah, who's there? Yeah.
Yes. Have you read Native Speaker? No, okay.
Oh,
Oh,
oh, yeah. The question was that in the acknowledgments, Gary is asking us to guess the author of a line that was taken,
that was stolen
stolen.
from my mentor, Chang-Rae Lee, who's a Korean American author who wrote the book Native Speaker, which I do teach at Columbia in my Immigrant A Go-Go class, Immigrant Lit A Go-Go. Um, the line is, "Your mother has died 1,000 deaths for you." Um, that has a very Korean ring, obviously, and this is spoken by Caspi, who is a Korean-made artificial intelligence. So Caspi is urging, I think he's urging her to find her birth mom, who's Korean American. She's died 1,000 deaths for you, and I stole that completely from Chang Ray's book. Of course, I called him beforehand and said, "Can I steal this?" And he's like, "Yeah, sure, whatever. Just buy me a drink." Yes.
Great. Other questions? Yes.
How do I come up with this? Do I look at friends? Do I look at other elements? What's the process? Well, Our Country Friends, for example, my previous book is all about my friends because, but it's like there's about 7 or 8 friends in that book, and they're all mushed together from maybe, I don't know, 3, 4 people per friend. So it's a casserole of 28 friends, if you will, turned into a collection of friends. Here, the thoughts were, what is it like for a child? Now that I have a child, I have access to the way contemporary children think. So that's, going to get some return on investment here from my son, right? So that's good. But then I thought, I mean, one of the things I was thinking about was when we were growing up in the Soviet Union, politics was not something you could avoid. You'd go, I grew up in Leningrad, you'd go to the Leningrad metro, there would be giant sayings from Lenin and Marx, and everything was gigantic. And the whole way you would speak to your fellow children, even at a very early age, was in a very political sense. You would talk about, oh, one day, 7-year-olds would say, I'm going to join the Komsomol, the Communist Youth League, already at 7. And then I thought about how, my kid grew up partly under the Trump years, and the way that he and his little friends would talk about Trump all the time, not in a positive way, but just about how he was ever present. And to me, this is one of the hallmarks of a system that's fraying from democracy and has authoritarian roots. Obviously, the Soviet Union never had any democracy. But it's a sign where when children who should at this point just be either studying or goofing off, and I'm very much into goofing off, I think that's very important, playing, socializing, that they have to deal with all of this stuff already, not to mention the environmental disaster that's going to be a part of their generations, right? It saddens me. And I thought that that would be something, Vera doesn't want to talk about 5-3. She's kind of forced into it. She's forced into a debate. In school, she has to debate on the pro 5-3 side in this debate that there's. So she's debating for disenfranchising herself. But because she wants to be such a great student and get into at least Swarthmore, she has to do a great job. So she'll debate about her becoming less of a citizen, on the side of that, right? So all of these things, again, this is the interesting thing I think about writing about not just anything speculative, but in any society where things aren't working, is that there's the personal, and then there's the giant set piece behind it, which is economic, social, political, environmental, whatever it is. My parents, when they talk about the past, it's not all well. And then Brezhnev died, and this happened. It's oh, we met at such and such thing, and I was wearing a leather jacket I'd bought in Poland that was the height of fashion. And, there's the personal is so important, even if you're living in this kind of system. But there's no way to ignore the system either. And that was my attempt here, to create just the right amount of ingredients so that all of that clicks in.
I think we have time for one more question. Yes.
Oh, okay. Is it time for it's time for me to confess something? I've never read Roald Dahl. Yeah, I mean, thank you for saying that. I understand. It's very simple. It's funny because my kid read it, but I hadn't read it. Well, now I'm going to have to read Roald Dahl. Which do you recommend? Where do I start? Matilda. Okay, I'm going to read it. That's interesting. Look, any books involving children, obviously the adults are going to be the stupid ones. There's not going to be, what are you going to make the children, like I said, a stupid child? Has that ever been done? I mean, because Mark Twain loved children. Obviously, Sawyer and Finn are, yeah, dumb adults, or well, except for Jim, I guess. But always the adults are trying to constrain them. Always the adults don't know what they're doing, and it's the children that have to make their own way. So almost any book will involve that. But I would love to read Matilda in part because I am writing a children's book right now, and it's not going well. I still haven't nailed it, but. It's about a capybara, anthropomorphic world, and the capybara is from Brazil.
Another rodent.
Another rodent named Joao, and Joao's parents emigrate to Nova York because his father makes grass balls for rodents, and he has to enroll in the Gifted Rodent Academy. So yeah, I'm ripping myself off a third time. Um, but yeah, I have still a lot of work to do on that. But writing about, yeah, it's interesting. I hopped right into like Soviet kids. There weren't that many children's books. You hopped right into Twain with introduction by Joseph Stalin. You just went straight for the good stuff. But I wonder if my issues in having difficulty with my baby Cappy book is that I've never really read children's books, and my son also went really fast to Harry Potter, which I don't know if that's I guess YA or something, but there weren't. I tried reading him simpler books, and he was like, eh. It's like Brown Bear, and he's like, no, no Brown Bear, no. But thank you. I will put that on my list, Matilda. Oh,
Well, Gary, thank you. This has been
oh,
marvelous.
well, thank you so much.
Thank you all for being here
Yeah, thank you
today.
so much.
Um, I see our gracious host, Omar in the wings, who I think may have a couple of closing remarks for us.
So, wanted to say thank you to Gary and Amy. Thanks so much for this amazing conversation. Looking forward to that Capybara book, and hopefully it gets made into like a Pixar movie or something. Yeah. And Gary will be signing books out in the lobby right outside of the store. And if you want to pick up the book, if you haven't yet, it's still being sold in the store. Thank you so much for joining us.